Hey there, friends! Welcome to your extra credit discussion for the Catspaw Dagger from Game of Thrones. This is one of the ones that you don't realize how cool it is till it's all done. I was like, hey, that'd be a cool dagger to make. Now that it's done, I'm like, that's a really neat dagger. This was a challenge. I don't do a ton of sculpting like this, so I got plenty of practice. And I'm pretty happy with how the results turned out, especially on this portion here. It's funny how if you're doing something that you're kind of new at, or you're not like, it's not your forte, and it turns out even a little bit decent, then you're kind of over the moon about it. That's kind of how I feel about this right now. Let's see, this one took about 3 days to make. It wasn't 3 full days. I drew up the pattern in about an hour. I did a lot of the profile work on the blade on half the day, I think on Sunday, and then I did the rest of this mostly on Monday and Tuesday. So about a 2.5 day build. A lot of that time was spent on one day just doing all of this sculpting. I was sitting at that rotary tool for, I don't know, like 3-hour stretches at a time just doing all the carving. Worth it though, totally worth it. But in case you are looking to do something like this, just set aside an awful lot of time for that rotary tool work. The epoxy clay I use, I think we've had it for a couple of years. I think it's starting to go bad, or I didn't mix it as well as I could have. There were a couple of spots where it just stayed soft, and that was gumming up my rotary tool bits a lot. So I just had just my X-Acto knife, and I would just clean out the teeth on the bits, or use a wire brush to clean them out. So it was a lot of starting and stopping, which was kind of annoying. So I will probably replace that epoxy clay before the next time I do something like this. Still worked though, it still worked out okay. It was just a little bit annoying to work. On this one, I tried out sanding sealer for the wood. I only used one layer. I sanded it down to about a 220, and then I used that sanding sealer on it. It really kind of raised the grain. I sanded it again and then used filler primer. It worked pretty well. If I'd had more time, I think, to work on that, I might have brushed on a layer of sanding sealer, sanded it, brushed on a second layer, and then sanded it again. But the filler primer really did a good job of filling that in. The blade and the pattern on it, kind of winged it. It's really hard. I don't have my reference picture here, but the reference pictures look like there's some sort of layered steel. Of course, for the show, they are sort of coming up with the way it's supposed to look like from the books, which aren't visual. So I figured I could take a little bit of license myself and just make it look kind of neat. And I think it does look really neat. It's kind of cool how the way the light shines on it, sometimes the darker paint actually looks lighter, like the tones swap back and forth depending on the angle of the light that you're looking at. So even though it literally is just like a shiny surface with some lines drawn on it, it still has a really neat effect, especially when it's playing in the sun. Pretty happy with how that turned out. On close inspection on the blade, there are some little specks and stuff, and I think that something about the setup with my paint booth over there, or my airbrush, or maybe I have some dirt or dust or something in the paint. But I must have been spraying out little chunks of something as it was going out there. So I may have to clean all of that. The paint booth over there, I may have to give everything a good clean to make sure I don't get any specks of stuff in there. And anything that's supposed to be like a smooth surface, like a bladed weapon. Little scratches and stuff are okay, because the blade would get scratched over time, but the little specks of dust and stuff on there, potentially maybe a cat hair, those would probably make the finish look not as genuine, let's say. So that's one of the things I'm a little displeased with, but you know, it's something that's kind of hard to notice from, say, where you are from here. A couple of tips or shots behind the scenes. One of the very last things I put in was these tiny little gems right here, and just as I was pressing that one in, it was a little big for the hole, and I totally shattered the part and had to glue it together and sand it and repaint it right at the last minute. So woo! We always hurt the ones we love the most, and in this case, I did it to myself. But probably can't even tell, I fixed it so well. Good news is we were rolling when I did that, so we do have a fun clip of me cursing.
It's gonna be 3 hours of you trying to set a gem.
In go. So this one is primarily wood and epoxy clay. Our buddy Evil Ted is making one out of EVA foam, which is fantastic. In fact, we both started on the same day without, on the same weapon on the same day without communicating to one another. I wanted to use the wood. I wanted something with a grain in it so it'd be nice and strong as opposed to MDF. Something I could sand really smooth. I also wanted an excuse to try out that sanding sealer. So that's why I chose wood for the blade. And then for the epoxy clay, I went with that because it gives me the option of adding a lot of fine detail. So these really thin little detail parts, really hard edges that I put on all the metal parts. I was able to get that with the epoxy clay to a much higher degree of finesse and detail than I would be able to get with EVA foam. And that was something for me that was important for this project. I could, if I wanted to, make a mold of this and then cast it in an expanding flexible foam, like Smooth-On's Flex Foam it, maybe with a wire embedded inside of it to give it some strength if I wanted a more convention-friendly version of this dagger, or of course you could just make one from scratch using EVA foam. For me, I'm not planning an Arya Stark costume anytime soon, so this one's just gonna go on the wall along with a lot of other wonderful props. I hope you've enjoyed this behind the scenes look into the process on this dagger. Of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. Be happy to answer those for you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me in the shop today. And of course, thank you so much for the support. It goes a really long way helping us do everything we do here in the shop. We have, we have rent and electricity. We have several employees. We're actually training up a video editor right now. So all of the support that you guys so generously give to us goes directly back into the shop and into being able to do more of this, do it better with more help. Thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy crafting.